Okay, so I grew up in Delaware. That's about, I don't know, 20,000 miles from here or something, right? Yeah, when you were from Jersey, that was cool. But yeah, I grew up there, and I'm the oldest of five. So I grew up a pretty normal childhood. A lot of times I say I'm from Philly just because more people seem to know where that is. I say Delaware, and nobody really knows, but it is the first state. So I hope California is teaching you guys well in history class. No, I'm just joking. But no, but seriously, I grew up really well. Both my parents are still married. I really had nothing that I could say was like the reason why I drank and used, but from the first time that I tried it, I loved it. Anyway, I am a faithful believer in Jesus Christ, and I've been recovered from drugs and alcohol for the past 13 years, and currently I'm struggling. Yeah. And currently I'm struggling with anxiety, but over the weekend I had a new experience with that, and I'm renouncing it in Jesus' name, so I think I'm set free and delivered. But one thing when I was a child, I would go to bed a lot of nights with fear, like a lot of fear. Fear that something would happen to my brothers and sisters, fear that my parents would get divorced, just a lot of fear. And from a young age, also, my dad's family, they drink, and so drinking was a very normal thing in my family. It still is, and it's not my responsibility to change them. But I was just talking to my dad recently, and he's been praying more. And he prayed for me to get sober. Like what somebody shared, I think it was like a week before or something, how this is a family thing. And especially being here, I've seen it so many times where people come here and then their family comes here. And I pray that that happens for my family too. Yeah. Yeah. So we love to party. We did parties for everything, parties for holidays, Father's Day, Mother's Day, everything. One of my earliest memories was a party, and I woke up and I just remember walking around and like seeing everyone asleep. I wasn't really sure what they were doing, but yeah, they were sleeping, so they had a great night. But I love all my family. If anybody could have loved me sober, it would have been them for sure. Um, and so yeah, I kind of just had a normal life, like kind of like the all-American dream from the outside looking in, except for that fear that I inwardly dealt with, and also feeling like I had to be perfect. My dad was one of the favorites in his family, and so when we would go there, it was like my cousins would be allowed to drink, but I wouldn't, or my cousins would be allowed to do this or that, or I wouldn't. And so there was kind of like this double standard. But even with that, I still found a way. And when my parents left, it was a game over anyway. So, but my mom's gonna watch, my dad's gonna watch. They are my biggest fans whenever Stone posts this. And if they could, they'd probably be here right now. So anyway, I couldn't live up to the pressure of being my siblings' role model, which is something I always wanted to do. Um, I had the feelings of fear, and I remember like a strong responsibility to do the right thing. My like fifth grade year, going into middle school, I think that's fifth grade or no, sixth grade, going into middle school. I guess I was like 14 or something. My mom got pregnant with my youngest brother, and I was so embarrassed because I don't know. I was like, what? Like, I don't know. I was talking to my mom yesterday, and she was telling me all these different things. But anyway, um, yeah. So my dad thought we were going to be in a country singing band when I was a kid. So I, up until like a few years ago, really thought I could sing. My dad never told me that I actually can't sing. So I would try. I've never got invited to do anything like that. But anyway, I wanted to try the choir maybe one time. But anyway, okay. So I started hanging out with like a lot of the tougher kids in middle school, just because I felt like I could fit in more with them. And at that same time, I started getting my identity in being like kind of going against the grain. My earliest memory of that is we had to wear uniforms, and everybody had to wear uniforms. So me and my friend organized a coalition, and we decided we were going to wear our pajamas to school to fight fight the man, you know. And the only thing is, I was the only one who wore my pajamas. And I wound up getting an award. Well, I don't even know how I got an award. So I had to go on stage in my pajamas in front of everyone. And it was when pajama wearing wasn't cool outside. Okay, so, but going into like my 7th and 8th grade year, I started drinking. And my first drink was with my cousin. And we had mixed all of the liquors in her grandfather's cabinet and just drank them. I don't remember getting drunk, but I remember the feeling and wanting to do it again. You know, like just the feeling of like, oh, this is something we're not supposed to do, and we're gonna get in trouble or whatever. And I loved that feeling, and I chased that feeling for a long time. You know, so then the first drink that I remember, I was 14 and I had a birthday party. And I think it was around Super Bowl or something, because my dad was having a party upstairs. So I had a basement party, and I had like inflatable furniture down there and just a whole bunch of different things. But anyway, I wound up getting really drunk. And my friends invited these guys who were definitely not 14 years old. So my mom called me upstairs to talk to me about some of the guests. And I went to like put my hand on the refrigerator, but it was way further than I expected, and I just like dropped. And at that point, my mom was like, "You're drunk," and I was like, "No, I'm not." But they proceeded to kick the whole party out and wondered who brought the alcohol to my party. Of course, I had brought the alcohol to my party because since the first time I tried it, I wanted to try it again, but I wanted to do it right. And I loved the feeling that alcohol gave me. It let me feel free. It let me feel exciting and part of the party. And I loved being like I loved having that feeling. So yeah, they kicked everybody out, and my dad held my hair up for me all night while I threw up. And he didn't have to do that, but he did. So he was super kind to me in that way. When I went back to school, everyone knew my name, and I started liking that attention, and the next few years I proceed to, do that to get attention, and also because I liked the effect that it had on me. So slowly but surely on the weekends, I would start drinking more and more. My grandparents got me a video recorder to which I proceeded to tape all of our drinking escapades so I could remember what happened. I would joke and say, like, I'm going to write my name on my arm so I can remember who I am, because I'm going to get, like, so smashed that I don't, like I don't. So, and I wanted to. So I also started smoking cigarettes that time, and kind of just doing that on the weekends, normal kid, but just on the weekends, partying, starting to smoke weed. And then going into my 9th grade year, I was actively drinking, smoking weed, cigarettes. I started, and I went on birth control that summer too. So the feelings that I had were a lot of freedom at that time. I felt good, Another thing that happened when I was going into high school that I forgot to write earlier is that my youngest brother, who was 2 at the time, wound up getting diagnosed with brain cancer. And we really weren't sure how it was going to go. And up until that point, my parents had always been really protective of me, like I said. But when that happened, when Nathan got that brain tumor, they were all of a sudden at the hospital with him, which for me, as selfish as it is, felt like freedom, because I felt like finally they're off my back. I can do whatever I want. And I did that. And I remember one of my brother's brain surgeries, I didn't go to the hospital. I never showed up. And instead I went to this party and bet this guy $5 that I could drive his car better than him. So his car was a Honda, a neighborhood car, no insurance, no registration, nothing like that. And I crashed it into 2 parked cars and a tree in a rabbi's house. I don't even know how it happened to be a rabbi's house, but yeah. And and I never showed up to the hospital. My dad had to come home, and the police were at the door because of course the guy was like, "No, you're going down for this. Like, there's no way. Like, I'm gonna take the cover for you. Yeah, I know where you live, so they're coming." I'm like, okay, well, I thought we were friends, but whatever. my dad told me something that night, he said, just start to cry and don't open the door. And that's kind of how I started to deal with like any type of police involvement or anything like that. It was like I would cry, it would be a sob story, and then some things I would get away with, and some things I wouldn't. And especially when my brother got cancer, it was really easy to be like, oh, here's this troubled teen, her brother, we're not sure about how he's going to turn out. And I played on that, but he is alive. He is alive. He's alive, and he's working. He's working now. He's got a job at a really cool department store that he's been really wanting to work at, and he's living a pretty normal life despite his disabilities. I'm super proud of him and grateful to be able to see him, just excel in life. But at the time, I was, 16, he was 2. I didn't know if he was going to live or die, and I wasn't ready to face that. So I ran as far as I could, but I never could make it out of Delaware. I love people who have the stories like they traveled, they went different places. I couldn't make it. Like, I would try to go different places, but I just couldn't make it very far. But anyway, so I'm around 16, that's going on. I'm running from my problems, drinking more and more. I have this boyfriend. He is I found out that he was a criminal. He's a convict. So he went to court one day and they said that he was gonna have 6 months in jail. And at that time I thought, oh my God, that's a life sentence, So naturally, at like 3 months in, I stopped dating him. I started dating his cousin, and it was just a crazy time. My mom withdrew me from school, and I was pretty much like on a roll, I was drinking as often as I could, doing whatever I could, and I started doing pills at that time too. So I was pretty much addicted to that before I even knew it. I started working at Lone Star Steakhouse, which you guys probably don't know what that is, but it's just a steakhouse. I was a hostess. That was going to be my lifetime career and job. I thought I had arrived, I was 16, I had a job. Didn't go to school anymore, so, nobody could tell me anything, right? But, during that time, it really worked for me. Quickly, though, it started not to work for me. When I was about 19, so a few years later, I'm still dating that guy, but I'm hanging out with people who are worse and worse than me because I keep hanging out with people who I can say, oh, they're bad, they're worse than me, I'm still okay. They're worse than me, I'm still okay. And so I was writing to my friend who was in jail, and my dad read the letter, and I was telling him how bad I was, like, addicted to pills and all this other stuff. And so when my dad read the letter, he knew that it was time for me to go to detox. And so he sent me to detox. It wasn't the first time he found me with drugs or alcohol or anything like that, so he kind of knew it was coming. But I remember when I went there, everyone went around the room and they started sharing some of the experiences that they had with drugs and alcohol. And I remember saying, I just like doing drugs. Like, I don't have a problem. I'm not going to be that way. I'm going to be good and fine. And I left, and my friend picked me up, and she had a bottle of Captain Morgan and some other stuff. And she said, you can just drink, right? And I, in all honesty, said, yes, of course I can just drink because pills were my problem. I'm not going to get like physically sick from withdrawal anymore from doing pills, but I can drink alcohol successfully. And I tried. I really tried. I tried to drink successfully. I tried to do a lot of other things successfully. And from the time I was 19 to 20, I pretty much tried every way to drink successfully, to do ecstasy successfully. And when I was 20, I started smoking crack. And that was one of the things I said I would never do. I used to hang out with people who sold it. I thought I was way above it. Never, ever, ever. So when I did that, I kind of felt like, what else is there to lose? Which for me went kind of really dark really quickly. I was in a diversion program, kind of like a program that like a first offenders program. And so when I was 20, I also wound up getting into some other trouble that I needed to get an attorney for. And I remember spending the night in a holding cell. I'm calling my parents, and nobody answered. And I went home, and I was freaking out, and then I went home and I was like, how could you not answer my call? Like, I was in a holding cell, I got in all this trouble, like, what are we gonna do about it? Because at the time, thought I was gonna go to jail, like, I really could have went to jail. And my mom looked at me in the face and she said, Courtney, we never know where you are, if you're alive or dead. And she just like walked away from me. And I really wish at that moment I would have been enough for me to get sober and apologize to my mom and make it right away. But I couldn't. You know, I really didn't have the power to be any different. I wasn't ready to face life, I guess. And I still thought that I could get away with drinking and all that. So by the time I was 21, I went into another detox, and then by the time I was 21, I basically was all out, just like not coming home, not showering, not brushing my teeth, just running, like doing everything that I judged everyone else for. I was just out there, like I didn't recognize myself. I weighed maybe like 90 to 100 pounds. I mean, I know I am small, but this was super small. And yeah, it was just, it was where I was at that time. And the first offenders program I was in finally said, you know, we're going to suggest that you go to a rehab. And I was like, well, I'm going to these 12-step meetings and I can go back to detox. And they're like, well, it's not really a suggestion. And I'm like, oh, okay, well then I guess I will go. So I went to this state-funded rehab, and every intention to, you know, get out and do the same exact thing, get the judge off my back, maybe put on a few pounds, talk to a few new people, see what I could do. But what happened was something that I never expected, and God showed up for me. He showed up for me, you know, he showed up for me. Yeah. When I checked into that detox, when I checked into that rehab, I had black eyes. My hair was blue in some spots because I had fallen asleep with hair dye in my hair. It was blonde, of course. Yeah. It was pretty funny. But anyway, I went there and I started to wake up every morning, and like without any drugs or alcohol, I really hated myself. I think I hated myself worse without drugs or alcohol than with them, you know, because I started to see like everything that I had done. And it wasn't a pretty road. I had a friend of mine who passed away during when I think we were 19 when she passed away. But as I was in rehab, like maybe the first month or so, I remember cracking open the Bible, and I read this in the Psalms. Now, when I reread it today, it sounds like pretty dark. I'm like, dang, I really was like in a moment there or something. So anyway, this is what it says. It says, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen on me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to a place of shelter, far from the tempest and the storm. And when I read that, I thought of her, you know, and I thought of how she died, and I thought of how her son found her dead, and I just started to cry, you know. I started to cry for the first time and really surrendered to God. I didn't know it then, but I know now that that was the moment where I was like, okay, God, whatever you want, you know, I don't care anymore. Like, I just don't want to be this way. And I felt freedom. You know, I felt freedom for that. Yeah. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to keep going. You know, I had to continue to have those experiences, but in the second month of my rehab, I had a conversation with someone who I considered to be life-changing, because I wanted kind of like the lifestyle of just kind of that fast lifestyle, the easy money, you know, doing things and all that kind of stuff. And I had a conversation with a woman who had that lifestyle. She spent time in and out of jail for armed robbery and all these different things that I thought were kind of cool, you know. Yeah. But I asked her if it was worth it, you know, and she told me that she didn't even get to go to her own mom's funeral. And I was like, oh, all right, and it really opened my eyes because I didn't think about the relationships that I would lose. I just thought only of myself and what it would feel like to win in that set or to look good in other people's eyes or to be successful in the ways that I thought success looked like when I had no clue, you know? So I graduated that rehab. I actually wound up staying sober, going into a transitional house, spending 2 years. Yeah, I spent 2 years in a transitional house. Maybe it was 1 year, I can't remember. Maybe 1 or 2 years. But anyway, after that, I thought I had some sobriety time. I started working in AA. I was familiar with the 12 steps, went through them, did that work, started sponsoring others, started making amends, thought I was fit to be in a relationship. So I did that too. And that ended pretty badly. In 2013, at 3 years sober, I was scheduled to get married. Yeah, I was going to get married to him. And I had to call it off because he relapsed. We wound up getting evicted 2 years later, and it was just a hard road there. I'm so grateful though. Isn't it funny what you think is tragic? God is like, no, that's a masterpiece. He's working on something. Yeah, he's working on something. And that was really hard for me. I stayed sober, but I felt super desperate in sobriety. I felt super empty. I felt pretty much those feelings of new sobriety all over again. I felt like life was over. I had identified myself in being a wife. I had identified myself in all that, and it felt like it was taken away from me. But that's when Jesus Christ first came to me as Jesus Christ. Up until that point, I had I think maybe like 6 or 7 years sober, but refused to go to church, refused to believe in like Jesus, even though I would read my Bible every night because I was scared if I didn't that I would lose my sobriety. So I was like religiously every night I would read the Bible, but it wasn't like I had a relationship with Christ. And then during that time, he really started ministering to my heart again in the Psalms, and just started doing things for me that I really, really couldn't do for myself. And in 2017, I got baptized. Yeah, yeah. And that same year, I went on a mission trip. And then, yeah, it was awesome. 2018, I did a program with the church for a leadership program. And 2019, my pastor came back from a conference and started talking to me all about this place called the Dream Center, and said that I should check it out, that I should bring some friends here and have an experience here. And at the time, I really wanted to go to Thailand and Cambodia. So I said, no, I'm going to go to Thailand and Cambodia. I'm for the nations, so I'm going to go there. And he's like, okay, all right. And one night it just hit me like, wait, that's your leadership. You asked him to be your leadership. He has an idea for you to do. And you say no, but you want a blessing somewhere else? No, right? No. So I said, okay, I'll go. And I came here for 1 week on a mission trip. And then I had mentally said, if I get laid off, then I'll come back here and do the internship, the immersion experience. And October came around of that same year when I went home, and I wound up getting laid off. And at the same time, our landlord sold our house. So it was this 6 month period where I could really go and do whatever. And I put in an application for the Dream Center immersion program. And I drove out here by myself from Delaware. And I only paid for one hotel room along the way. God blessed it so much throughout the way. And each time I got to visit family and friends. And the last visit that I had before I came here was in Arizona. And you guys know, I told you a little bit about my story. My dad prays. I wasn't raised in church or anything, but I found out when I was in Arizona that I have a great grandmother who would read her Bible and pray for me every day. And when I found that out, it was like something got like secure within me, and I could make the rest of the trip. That 6 hours was way different than the first, 30 or whatever it was. And Since then, since being here, I've gotten involved in Celebrate Recovery, something that I was strongly against, not because of anything, but just my own biases. And, I really kind of counted myself out. I wanted to separate my recovery in church because I didn't want, I don't know, maybe I did, I really don't know why. But I just didn't want to. I just had an opinion about it, and I decided I wasn't going to do it. But COVID kind of made that easy because you guys were open, so that worked really well. And I'm glad that I'm here. I got to meet with Linda, and we've been doing some step work, go through a step study with a lot of ladies here, and really face the internal issues, because what I realized is when I got sober, things got worse, and I had to really face what I had been running from this whole the time. So I wanted to close with this story. When I was kind of in my mess, I had a crashed up car in my driveway pretty consistently. The first time I crashed a car was like, I don't know, when I was 19 or something, because I got my license taken until I was 18, so I only had my license for a very short period of time. But anyway, I managed to crash it. I'm a much better driver now, by the way, just so you know. Yeah, I haven't gotten a ticket in a very long time, which is amazing. Yeah, so good. So I would have a crashed up car in my driveway, and I went to an AA meeting one time, and this guy, his name was Bear, he said, "Did you have a crashed up car in your driveway? Did you live on Boxwood Road?" And I was like, "What? Why?" And he was like, "Oh, I was just wondering." And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." He's like, "Well, I prayed for you to get here." He's like, "I prayed for you to get here all the time." And when he told me that, it was like one of those moments where the scales kind of started to fall from my eyes. It's almost like Paul when he was on the road to Damascus and he got hit with that light. It's like, what you've been running from is right there in your face, and you have no choice but to see it for what it really is, an encounter with Jesus Christ, the living God, right? The one who came to save us. It was that moment where I was like, okay, maybe I have a shot. Maybe I can actually spend one day without drugs and alcohol. Maybe I can spend one day without hating myself, and doing all these things to mask the way that I feel and wanting to fit in and all that other stuff. But the main thing that for me has been the biggest blessing is being able to be of service, being able to get out of the way and see what the Lord can do. And He's just beginning. He's just starting to do what He can do, and it's an honor and a privilege to just walk this road with Him. And I'm really grateful for you guys for allowing me to share my testimony with you. Thank you.